Hello and welcome. You're listening to another powerful story of war, leadership, and strategy, where every decision carries the weight of thousands of lives and every moment can reshape history. Here on World War Lab, we dive deep into the moments that change the course of battles and expose the true minds behind the commanders. And tonight's story begins on March 6, 1943, at the Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stood inside his command post, quietly reviewing intelligence reports spread across a large wooden table. The maps before him were marked with recent German victories, showing the Americans' first major engagement in North Africa and, at the same time, their most devastating defeat. The officers of his Africa Corps staff gathered around, studying prisoner interrogations and captured documents. Their mood was confident, almost casual. They spoke openly, agreeing that the Americans were inexperienced, poorly coordinated, still green, and completely unprepared to face veteran German forces. In their minds, the enemy was already broken. Then the door opened without a knock. An intelligence officer stepped inside, holding a single sheet of paper. It was a freshly decoded intercept. Without a word, he walked straight to Rommel and placed it on the table. Rommel picked it up and read it once. Then he read it again. His face remained calm, but his posture subtly stiffened. Slowly, deliberately, he set the paper back down. When Rommel asked, the officer glanced at his notes. He took command 2 days ago, Field Marshal. March 4th, General Field Marshal. Rommel stared at the map for a long moment. The officers around him waited in uneasy silence. Finally, he looked up and spoke quietly. Yet his words carried enough weight to make every man in the room straighten his back. "Gentlemen," he said, "the war in Africa has just become considerably more difficult." The intercept was unmistakably clear. Major General George S. Patton, Jr. had taken command of 2 corps. The same American force Rommel had crushed at the Kasserine Pass just 2 weeks earlier. The same units he had described in his reports to Berlin as unfit for serious combat. And now Patton, the one American General Rommel had been tracking even before the war began, was rebuilding them. If you want to know what Rommel truly said about facing Patton, and why it became one of the most famous acknowledgments between enemy commanders in World War II, then hit that subscribe button for WW2 War Files right now. Like this video, and drop a comment telling us which rivalry between World War II generals you want us to cover next. Because what is about to unfold is not simply about 2 armies colliding. It is about 2 tactical minds recognizing one another across the battlefield, and what that recognition would mean for the rest of the war. Rommel moved closer to the intelligence map. His finger traced the American positions. Beside him stood his intelligence officer, man Friedrich von Stahlenberg, holding the latest reports. "Read me the Kasserine casualties again," Rommel said. Von Stahlenberg opened his folder. 2 corps suffered approximately 6,000 casualties at Kasserine Pass. Field Marshal lost 183 tanks, 194 half-tracks, and 512 wheel vehicles. Their command structure was reported as disorganized and ineffective. Rommel nodded slowly. Von Stahlenberg flipped to the next page. As of March 6, they have reorganized 3 divisions, established new forward positions near Gafsa and Fariana, and increased patrol activity by 300%. In how long? Rommel asked sharply. 48 hours, sir." Rommel lifted his gaze. "That is not reorganization. That is transformation." Von Stahlenberg hesitated, then continued. "Field Marshal, the prisoners we captured yesterday near the Senate station mentioned something. They say there's been a change. New discipline. Stricter command. They keep referring to their new commander as—" "I know who Patton is," Rommel interrupted quietly. Another officer stepped forward. "This intercept, Field Marshal, you're certain it's accurate?" "Confirmed by 3 independent sources," von Stahlenberg replied. "Prisoner interrogations, radio traffic analysis, and aerial reconnaissance showing his command vehicles arriving at 2 Corps headquarters on March 4th. Rommel studied the map again. Eisenhower gave him 2 corps, the same corps we defeated at Kasserine. Yes, sir. There was a brief pause. Then Rommel said something that surprised everyone in the room. Then Eisenhower is smarter than I thought. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally spoke. Field Marshal, with respect, these are the same American units we routed 2 weeks ago. Surely one general can't. Rommel cut him off. You haven't read Patton's work, have you? Sir, his theories on armored warfare, mobile tactics, combined arms coordination. I've read everything he has published. Rommel tapped the map. Patton doesn't think like other American commanders. He doesn't think like the British either. He thinks like we do, perhaps even more aggressively. The room fell silent. Rommel continued studying the map, his mind clearly running through endless tactical scenarios. Finally, he straightened. Get me a connection to Kasserine's headquarters and to von Arnim. I need to speak with them immediately. Because Rommel had been studying Patton for years. He had read his articles, analyzed his pre-war exercises, followed his career closely, and what he knew would change everything about how he fought the next battle. That evening, March 6, 1943, Rommel's call went through to Field Marshal Albert Kasserine at German headquarters in Rome. General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, joined the conference. Gentlemen, Rommel began without any preamble, I am requesting authorization to reposition our forces defending the Gafsa sector. American command has changed. Von Arnim's voice came through, skeptical. Changed? You defeated them 2 weeks ago. They're still recovering from Kasserine. They were recovering, Rommel replied. Patton took command on March 4th. That changes everything. Kasserine's tone was diplomatic, but doubtful. One American general? You have defeated British commanders with twice as experience. Montgomery. Einleck. Montgomery is methodical, Rommel interrupted. Predictable. Einleck was cautious. Patton is neither. I have studied his work, Kasserine replied. His theories on mobile warfare, armored tactics, combined arms, but thinking and executing aggressively are 2 different things. These are the same American units we shattered at Kasserine Pass, von Arnim added. The same inexperienced soldiers, the same equipment problems. Under different leadership, Rommel said, his voice hardening. Patton will use them differently. He already is. Our reconnaissance confirms he is repositioning for an offensive. There was a long pause on the line. An offensive? Kasserine finally said. After Kasserine? They haven't had time to reorganize, let alone plan a major attack. That is exactly what I would do in his position, Rommel replied. Attack before we expect it, while we believe they are still regrouping. Restore morale through action, not rest. It is textbook aggressive warfare. It is exactly what Patton would do. Another pause. What specifically are you requesting? Kasserine asked. Reinforcements for the Gafsa, Magnesy sector, repositioning of our mobile reserves from the north, and authorization to assume he will attack within 10 days. 10 days? Von Arnim's voice repeated. The tension on the line rose instantly. Impossible, von Arnim said. They need at least 3 weeks to... I said the same thing in 1940. Rommel cut in sharply. When people told me the French couldn't be defeated in 6 weeks, I was wrong then to underestimate speed and aggression. I won't make that mistake again. The line went silent for a long moment. Finally, Kasserine spoke. Your concerns are noted, Owen, but we cannot redeploy significant forces based on speculation about American intentions. Our resources are already stretched thin. This isn't speculation, Rommel replied. The decision is final, Kasserine said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Continue monitoring American movements and report any concrete intelligence. But there will be no major repositioning at this time. The line went dead. Rommel remained standing at the map table, Alone now, the room felt suddenly larger, emptier. His chief of staff entered quietly. "Field Marshal, what are your orders?" Rommel did not look up from a map. "Prepare defensive positions in the Gaza sector. Strengthen our reconnaissance screen. Position anti-tank units on likely approach routes." He paused. "Prepare for contact. Patton will come soon." And Rommel was right. But what happened next would shock even him. Not because the Americans attacked, but because of how completely Patton transformed them in just 72 hours. From March 7th through March 10th, 1943, Rommel's intelligence officers delivered daily reports that documented something unprecedented: the total transformation of the American II Corps in less than a week. The reports arrived steadily, each more surprising than the last. On the first day, Patton instituted strict uniform standards across II Corps. Every soldier was required to wear a full uniform, including helmet and leggings at all times, even in rear areas. Officers caught without proper dress were fined on the spot. One general was reportedly fined $50 for appearing without his helmet. The message was unmistakable. Discipline began with appearance. On the second day, training exercises began in forward areas, sometimes within artillery range of German positions. American units conducted live-fire drills using tactics that mirrored German methods. Reconnaissance in force, coordinated tank and infantry assaults, rapid repositioning. It was aggressive, almost reckless, but undeniably effective. Unit cohesion visibly improved. On the third day, patrol activity increased by 300%. American units began probing German positions. They no longer retreated immediately when fired upon. Instead, they called in artillery and pressed their attacks. Prisoner interrogations revealed a new confidence. They referred to their commander as "old blood and guts," and spoke openly of how everything had changed. On the morning of March 10th, Rommel's intelligence officer delivered his briefing. "Field Marshal, American patrols engaged our positions near Senate Station yesterday. They did not retreat when we opened fire. They called in artillery support and attacked." Rommel looked up from his reports. "Casualties?" The officer hesitated. "Ours or theirs, sir?" "Theirs." "They took losses," the officer said carefully. "But they pressed the attack anyway. That is new behavior for them." Rommel nodded slowly. "That is Patton." Another officer entered with aerial reconnaissance photographs. "Field Marshal, new images from yesterday's flight over American positions." Rommel studied them closely. American tank units were conducting night movement exercises, something they had not done before Patton arrived. Artillery positions were being surveyed and registered with German-style precision. Supply dumps were moving forward closer to the front lines. Command posts were being repositioned. "They're preparing for an offensive," his chief of staff observed. "Obviously," Rommel replied. He traced lines on the map, calculating distances, timing, approach routes. "The question is when." "Surely they need more time." "Field Marshal, it has only been 6 days since Patton took command." Rommel shook his head. "If I were Patton, I wouldn't wait. Every day we have to prepare is a day. He loses the element of surprise." He tapped the map. March 17th, perhaps the 16th if he is feeling particularly aggressive. His staff officer stared at him. "That is less than a week, sir. Which is why we need to be ready in 5 days." But Rommel's warnings were not confined to his immediate staff. On March 12th, he sent an urgent tactical assessment directly to Kasserine and to the OKW, the German High Command in Berlin. The message was blunt. American II Corps under Patton exhibits fundamentally different operational characteristics compared to previous command: increased tactical aggression, improved coordination between arms, demonstrated willingness to accept casualties for tactical gains. Recommend assuming American offensive capability restored to full effectiveness within days, not weeks. Kasserine's response arrived within hours, later documented in German military archives. Rommel is overestimating American recovery capability. Assessment here is that 2 Corps requires a minimum of 3 to 4 additional weeks of reorganization before offensive operations are possible. Continue monitoring, but maintain current dispositions. Rommel read the response and set it aside without comment. His staff waited. "They don't believe me," one officer said quietly. "They will," Rommel replied, "in about 5 days." And his predictions continue with unsettling accuracy. Forward observers reported American tank units conducting night movement exercises, preparing for pre-dawn attacks. Artillery positions were being surveyed and registered, the standard preparation for offensive fire support. Supply dumps moved forward, shortening resupply distances once operations began. Command posts shifted closer to the front, reducing communication delays for fast-moving operations. Rommel's chief of staff reviewed the latest reports. They are preparing for an offensive, Field Marshal. "I know," Rommel said. "The question is whether Berlin will believe it before it happens." "When do you expect them to attack, sir?" Rommel studied the map one more time. "If I were Patton, tomorrow. But he needs a few more days to complete his preparations. March 17th. Perhaps the 16th if he is feeling aggressive. That's less than a week. Which is why," Rommel said, turned to his staff, "we will be ready in 5 days. Position anti-tank guns on the approaches to Guettar. Strengthen our fallback positions. Make sure every unit commander understands this will not be like Kasserine. The Americans have changed." But Rommel's warnings about Patton went higher than Kasserine. What he told Berlin next would be ignored until it was too late. March 17, 1943, 0600 hours. Exactly when Rommel predicted. The pre-dawn darkness over Tunisia was shattered by artillery fire. American forces under Patton's command launched their offensive against German positions at Gafsa and Guettar. The attack bore every hallmark of Patton's aggressive tactical style. The artillery barrage was intense, concentrated, professional, nothing like the disorganized fire support at Kasserine. Tank and infantry coordination was precise, using German-style combined arms tactics that Rommel immediately recognized from Patton's pre-war writings. Multiple axes of advance forced the German defenders to split their attention, making any concentrated defense almost impossible. There was no pause, no hesitation, only constant forward pressure, exactly as Patton's theories had always prescribed. Rommel was at command post when the first report arrived. His units were already positioned for defense. He had quietly overridden Kasserine's orders and repositioned key assets based on his own predictions. Now, those predictions were proving frighteningly accurate. A forward commander's voice came over the radio. American armor advancing on Guettar. Multiple columns. Coordinated infantry support. There is no pause in their movement. This is not the same American force we faced at Kasserine Pass. Another report followed only minutes later. They're using our own tactics against us. Combined arms, leapfrogging advances, artillery walking ahead of their armor. A third transmission cut in, requesting reinforcements. Field Marshal. They are not stopping. They are attacking straight through our counterfire. Rommel issued orders with calm precision, shifting units from his carefully prepared reserves, directing artillery fire, coordinating counterattacks. His staff watched him closely, noting the contrast to Kasserine. There, Rommel had attacked aggressively, exploiting American confusion. Here, he fought defensively, methodically, almost cautiously. One of the staff officers finally asked what everyone was thinking. "How did you know, Field Marshal? How did you predict the exact date?" Rommel did not look up from the map. His voice was quiet. "Because it is exactly what I would have done." He had predicted the attack down to the day. His staff had thought he was guessing. He was not. March 17th through March 23rd, 1943. The Battle of Guettar. American forces under Patton faced German forces under Rommel in what became the first true test of American combat effectiveness in North Africa. But something unusual was happening on the German side. Something Rommel's own officers noticed immediately. At Kasserine Pass, Rommel had exploited American inexperience with bold, aggressive maneuvers, mobile warfare at its finest, the tactics that had made him famous. Against Patton, he fought differently. Defensive positions, prepared fallback lines, controlled withdrawals. It was effective, but it was not his usual style. Reports sent to German headquarters documented the shift. American tank attacks at Guettar were being met with prepared anti-tank defenses rather than sweeping counterattacks. German forces traded space for time, falling back to prepared positions instead of launching the aggressive flanking maneuvers Rommel was known for. Most telling of all, Rommel personally coordinated artillery fire, something he normally delegated to subordinates. It was a sign that he was taking this battle far more seriously than usual. Italian commanders serving under German command sent their own observations to Rome. Rommel, they wrote, kept referring to what Patton would do next during planning sessions. He was not simply reacting to American moves. He was anticipating them, predicting them, and his predictions kept proving correct. Then something extraordinary happened. A German signals officer intercepted American radio traffic. Unencrypted, careless operational chatter. He brought the intercept to Rommel immediately. Field Marshal, we have the coordinates of the American command post. General Patton is personally directing operations from a forward observation position. He is within range of our artillery. We can target him now. Rommel studied the coordinates. Then the map, that is Patton's actual position? Yes, sir. Confirmed by triangulation. He is exposed. We can eliminate their commander. Rommel was silent for a long moment. His staff waited. Finally, he spoke one word. No. The officer looked confused. Sir, I said no. We will not fire on that position. But, Field Marshal, we have the opportunity to... Rommel cut him off sharply. That is exactly where I would place myself in his position. Forward, where I can see the battlefield. If we fire on him, he will know we have identified his command structure. Better to let him believe he is secure and use this intelligence to predict his decisions. Another officer spoke, skeptical, or we could simply eliminate their commander. Rommel turned to face him. I do not win battles by artillery luck. We will beat him tactically or not at all. Everyone in the room understood what that meant. This was no longer just another battle. It was not personal in an emotional sense, but in a professional one. Rommel respected his opponent too much to try to remove him through random artillery fire. He wanted to defeat Patton's mind, not rely on chance. By March 23rd, the Battle of Guettar reached a tactical stalemate, but it was a stalemate with enormous implications. At Kasserine Pass, American forces had been routed, scattered, and demoralized. At Guettar, they had held their ground against the Afrika Korps. More importantly, Rommel had been forced to commit reserves he wanted to preserve, reposition defensive lines, and fight cautiously. All because Patton had changed the equation. German casualties were higher than expected. American morale was soaring. The narrative of the campaign had shifted. A staff officer delivered the casualty reports. Field Marshal. Final assessment from Guettar. We held our positions, but what? Our casualties are between 1,400 and 2,000, depending on how Italian losses are counted. The Americans lost approximately 1,000. Rommel nodded slowly, and we fought defensively. They attacked. Yes, sir. Another officer ventured. They were lucky, Field Marshal. Favorable terrain. Good weather. Rommel cut him off immediately. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Patton prepared them. He gave them the opportunity. That is not luck. That is generalship. The room fell silent. No one argued, because everyone understood what had just happened. The Americans, the same force that had been destroyed at Kasserine Pass only 5 weeks earlier, had fought the Afrika Korps to a standstill. And they had done it because one general had transformed them in less than 3 weeks. And when American forces finally struck the German lines with full strength, Rommel said something to his officers that revealed how he truly felt about facing Patton, words that would define their entire rivalry. March 28, 1943. Rommel's command post, Tunisia. The Battle of El Guettar was over. The American offensive had been stopped, but it had not been broken. German lines held, but at significant cost. Now, Rommel received the order he had been expecting for weeks. He was being recalled to Germany. Officially, it was for health reasons. Unofficially, everyone understood the truth. The Afrika Korps was doomed. Tunisia would fall. Germany was pulling its most celebrated field commander out before the inevitable collapse. RML, Rommel gathered his senior staff for a final operational briefing before his departure. Reports were stacked neatly beside the map table. His officers stood at attention. The atmosphere was heavy, respectful, and tense. There was a brief pause. Then one staff officer spoke. "Field Marshal, before you leave, your assessment of the American forces." Rommel looked at the map for a long moment. His fingers slowly traced the lines that marked the American positions, the same positions they had held against everything his forces had thrown at them. "They learned," he said finally. "That is the important thing. At Kasserine, they were disorganized, poorly led, reacting instead of acting. In 3 weeks under Patton, they became something else entirely." Another officer ventured cautiously. "But we held them at El Guettar, sir. They did not break through." Rommel turned to face him. "We held them because I positioned every available unit to stop them. I committed reserves I did not want to commit. I fought defensively instead of maneuvering. Do you understand what that means?" The officer hesitated. "That we successfully defended?" "It means Patton forced me to fight his battle, not mine," Rommel replied. "That is what good generals do. They make you respond to them instead of executing your own plan." The room fell completely silent. No one had ever heard Rommel speak this way about an opponent before. His chief of staff asked carefully, "What should we expect from the Americans now, sir?" Rommel turned back to the map. "You should expect them to keep improving. Patton will push them harder, train them better. And when they invade Europe, and they will invade Europe, they will be formidable." "More formidable than the British?" someone asked. Rommel paused. This was the question that mattered, the one his staff needed answered before he left, the one that would shape how they prepared for future. "The British are methodical, professional, experienced," Rommel began. "They fight by doctrine. Montgomery plans carefully, executes precisely, and rarely takes unnecessary risks. He is predictable, but that predictability is built on competence. You know what Montgomery will do, and you must respect that he will do it well." He paused again, choosing his words. Patton fights like we do, aggressive, mobile, willing to take risks for operational gains. He leads from the front. His men follow him because he shares their danger. When I learned he was commanding against me, I told you the war in Africa had just become more difficult." Another pause. "I was wrong." "Wrong, sir?" his chief of staff asked. Rommel turned to face them. "It did not become more difficult. It became interesting. For 3 years, I have fought opponents who were either too cautious or too predictable. The British under Wavell, under Auchinleck, under Montgomery, all competent, all professional, all cautious. The Americans at Kasserine were inexperienced and poorly led. I have waited for a worthy opponent. Now that I have found him, I have to leave." The words hung in the air. His officers understood what they had just heard. Rommel, the Desert Fox, Germany's most celebrated field commander, the general who had defeated every British commander sent against him, had just acknowledged that he had met his match. "When you face him again," Rommel continued, his voice taking on a sharper urgency, "and you will face him again, remember this. Patton does not fight to win territory. He fights to destroy your ability to resist. Do not give him time. Do not give him space to maneuver. And whatever you do, do not underestimate him because he is American. That is what some of us did at Guettar, and it cost us. His chief of staff nodded slowly. We understand, Field Marshal. I hope you do, Rommel said quietly, because I will not be here to face him next time. You will. This was not just professional respect between enemy commanders. This was Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox, the master of mobile warfare, acknowledging that he had met his equal. The phrase, "I have waited for a worthy opponent," carried deeper meaning. For nearly 3 years, he had been fighting enemies he considered either too cautious or too inexperienced. The British were competent but predictable. The American generals before Patton were simply unprepared. Rommel had won victories, but they were victories without true challenge, without an opponent who thought the way he did, who valued the same tactical principles, who was willing to take the same risks. Patton was different. He combined German-style tactical aggression with American industrial power and a willingness to attack that bordered on reckless. Rommel recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood that modern warfare was about speed, shock, and overwhelming force applied at the decisive point. More importantly, Rommel's warning to his staff, "Do not underestimate him because he is American," showed that he understood what Berlin had not yet accepted. American forces, under aggressive leadership, would become a decisive factor in the war. He had seen the transformation at Guettar. In 3 weeks, Patton had taken a defeated, demoralized force and turned it into an effective fighting unit capable of standing against the best Germany had to offer. From Rommel's perspective, the tragedy was timing. He had finally found an opponent worthy of his tactical skill, someone who could push him, challenge him, make him better. And he was being pulled out of Africa before they could truly test themselves against each other. Rommel left North Africa on March 9, 1943. He never faced Patton in direct battle again, though their indirect rivalry continued through intelligence reports, operational planning, and a mutual respect that outlived the war itself. The Tunisia campaign ended on May 13, 1943, with total acts of surrender. Over 275,000 German and Italian troops were captured, more prisoners than were lost at Stalingrad. American forces under Patton's command had proven themselves combat effective against Germany's elite units. At Guettar specifically, the numbers told the story. American casualties were approximately 1,000. German casualties were estimated between 1,400 and 2,000. More significantly, Rommel, the master of mobile warfare, had been forced into a defensive posture for the first time in North Africa. The psychological shift was enormous. Patton's transformation of 2 corps remains one of the most dramatic examples of leadership impact in military history. In 3 weeks, from March 4th to March 23rd, he took a force that had been routed at Kasserine Pass and turned it into an effective fighting unit that could stand against the Afrika Korps. Discipline was restored, tactics were overhauled, confidence was rebuilt, and all of it happened under fire in forward areas with the enemy watching. But Rommel's statement, "I have waited for a worthy opponent," was not just about a personal rivalry between 2 generals. It revealed something deeper about how the German military viewed the American entry into World War II. In 1941 and 1942, German commanders generally dismissed American military capability. They saw the United States as industrially powerful but militarily inexperienced, a nation that could manufacture enormous numbers of tanks and aircraft but did not yet understand how to use them effectively on the battlefield. The disaster at Kasserine Pass seemed to confirm that belief. American forces were routed, losing more ground in less time than any British force had lost at Rommel. The verdict appeared obvious. The Americans were not ready for modern warfare. Then Patton arrived, and in just 3 weeks, he completely changed Rommel's assessment of American combat potential. Not through speeches, not through propaganda, and not through promises, but through results on the battlefield. Guettar proved that American forces, when properly led and aggressively employed, could match German units that had been fighting continuously since 1939. The equipment was the same, the soldiers were the same, but the leadership was different, and that made all the difference. Rommel saw this immediately. His warnings to Kasserine and to the German High Command were attempts to prepare the German military for what was coming. A fully mobilized American war machine, combining industrial power with increasingly effective tactical leadership. But those warnings were ignored. Berlin still believed the Americans would need months to recover from Kasserine. They were wrong. After the war, Rommel's personal notes, later compiled in a posthumously published collection edited by B.H. Liddell Hart, included this assessment he wrote in 1943 about the Allied generals he had faced. Patton concerned me most, not because he was more skilled than Montgomery. Montgomery was technically proficient and strategically sound, but Patton was unpredictable. He attacked when caution suggested defense. He took risks no European general would take, and his men followed him because he led from the front, sharing their dangers. This combination of aggression, risk-taking, and personal leadership made him dangerous in ways that methodical commanders were not. Had I remained in Africa, our duel would have been educational. That final word, educational, is especially revealing. Rommel, the master of mobile warfare, the general who had practically written the doctrine of armored tactics, wanted to learn from Patton. He saw in him a reflection of his own tactical philosophy, perhaps even refined and amplified by American industrial capacity and operational scale. Rommel and Patton never met in person. They never spoke directly. They never shook hands, never shared a drink, never acknowledged each other face to face. Yet their indirect rivalry shaped the North African campaign and influenced how both men fought their later battles. When Rommel was later tasked with defending France against the Allied invasion in 1944, his defensive planning specifically accounted for what he called Patton-style aggressive armored tactics. He positioned mobile reserves for rapid counterattacks, built anti-tank defenses in depth, and focused on disrupting supply lines to halt fast-moving operations before they could gain momentum. He was preparing to face Patton again, even though they had never fought a full campaign against each other. When Patton landed in France as commander of the Third Army, his operational planning reflected lessons from Guettar, the importance of speed, moving faster than the enemy could react, the value of aggressive reconnaissance, knowing what the enemy was doing before they knew what you were doing, forcing enemy commanders to react instead of plan, making them fight your battle, not theirs. These were lessons learned from the only opponent who had ever fought him to a true tactical draw. In a strange way, they made each other better generals. Rommel learned to respect American combat capability and a plan for aggressive, unconventional enemy operations. Patton learned that even the most aggressive tactics required logistical discipline, and that even the best attacks could be stopped by properly prepared defenses. Their rivalry became legendary because it was a rivalry between equals, two generals who thought about warfare the same way, who valued speed and aggression over caution, who led from the front and inspired absolute loyalty in their troops, who understood that modern warfare was about destroying the enemy's ability to resist, not merely capturing territory. Rommel's words in March 1943, "I have waited for a worthy opponent," acknowledged something the German High Command had not yet accepted and many Allied commanders had not yet realized. The Americans were no longer the inexperienced force that stumbled at Kasserine Pass. They were becoming a military power capable of challenging and defeating German forces when properly led. And it had taken only 3 weeks under Patton's command to make that transformation undeniable. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, captured German officers were interviewed by Allied intelligence. They were asked which Allied commanders they had most feared. The answer was almost always a tie: Montgomery for his methodical precision and overwhelming preparation, and Patton for his aggressive unpredictability and willingness to take risks. But when asked which commander they most wanted to face as a test of their own tactical skill, as a true measure of their ability, the answer was always Patton, because Rommel had set the standard. After Guettar, every German commander who studied the operational reports understood why Rommel had said what he said. Patton was not just another Allied general with more tanks and planes. He was a tactician who thought the way German commanders thought, who valued what they valued, who fought the way they fought. He was, in Rommel's words, a worthy opponent. And in war, that is the highest compliment one commander can give another. The race to Messina, the breakout from Normandy, the relief of Bastogne, the drive across France and into Germany, all of these operations carried Patton's tactical signature. All reflected the lessons learned during those 3 weeks in Tunisia, when he faced Rommel across the battlefield and proved that American forces, properly led, could match anyone. Rommel never received his rematch. He was pulled from Africa, briefly assigned to Italy, then sent to France, where he was seriously wounded in an Allied air attack and later forced to take his own life after being implicated in a plot against Hitler. But his assessment of Patton, written in March 1943 after only 3 weeks of indirect combat, proved prophetic. Patton was dangerous not merely because he had more resources, though he did, not because he always had better equipment, though sometimes he did, but because he thought differently. He attacked when others defended. He took risks when others consolidated. He pushed his forces harder and faster than anyone believed possible. And his men followed him because he led from the front, because he shared their dangers, because he believed in what they could achieve. That was what Rommel recognized at El Guettar. That was why he said he had finally found a worthy opponent. And that is what made their brief, indirect rivalry one of the most fascinating command relationships of World War II. 2 generals, 2 tactical minds, 2 philosophies that were remarkably similar despite fighting for opposite sides. And 3 weeks in Tunisia that changed how both sides viewed American combat capability for the rest of the war. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of history enthusiast we create content for here on World War Lab Subscribe. So you don't miss our next deep dive into the untold stories of World War II. Hit the like button if you learned something new today, and leave a comment telling us which general, battle, or forgotten moment of history you want us to explore next. Your support keeps these stories alive.